One thing that we haven't talked a lot about, there's some tools that recruiters do tend to use a lot. LinkedIn Recruiter, Zoom, Indeed, there's some tools there. Again, I think there's some mysteries here on how it does and doesn't work, how effective it is at working, and then how much bias may or may not seep into it. So I'm curious. I'm not asking you, like, let's not throw any particular company under the bus, but I'm just curious about like what your thoughts are on how effective some of those tools are at actually helping you source candidates.
I mean, I think with anything, it just depends on the role in the industry, right? So LinkedIn is obviously kind of on everyone's tip of their tongue. Like it's probably the most commonly used one. But there are some industries where people just are not on LinkedIn. Some include medical, like physicians. There's not all of the physicians are on LinkedIn. You know, that's not kind of a thing there. A lot of academia isn't on there. A lot of frontline type employees. Construction's not as frequently on LinkedIn. So those are just like a handful of examples, but there's very industry specific places that a recruiter might go. And this is why a lot of times you would have specialized recruiters. So I think LinkedIn, while probably the most common, most well-known, I think there's also bias in terms of who's in your own network and what type of role you do and what type of people are in your own network that also lead to like biases to, who gets uncovered in those type of spaces. I think another thing that we kind of, you hinted on earlier, Kim, was the generational differences. So a lot of times folks that are older who have been at one company forever, if at best they have a LinkedIn, there's probably not anything on it. But a lot of people don't have LinkedIn accounts who have been in one place forever because why, right? And on the converse of that, you have a younger generation that you have this whole place happening now where there's like, I think there's like recruiting happening off of TikTok these days now, right? Because it's a whole different generation of people coming into the workforce as well. And so I think there is your tried and true places, but really it comes down to what roles are you looking for and what industry are you in, and really leaning into what makes sense for the type of role that you're looking for.
Thank you. I'd love to hear, and anybody can jump in on this one. I think there is some misinformation about applicant tracking systems and how they function, how they don't function, what they're capable of. I think that there is some myths out there that if I just put the right keywords in my resume, if I just upload my resume in exactly the right way, whether it's Word or PDF and the right formatting, that somehow the applicant tracking system is going to go, like here's the magic wand. Boom, boom, boom. There's 5,000 people that applied for my rec. Here are the 3 people you should actually open their resume, right? So anyone who's actually worked in an applicant tracking system can sort of speak to this a little bit and help people understand how they actually work. I know everyone's smiling.
Well, it's funny. So I feel like it's funny being on the recruiter side, and it's also I have worked more with applicant tracking systems, like with them, not in them. And I will say they're very, there's a wide degree of sophistication of tools out there. And so it's almost hard to say with a blanket statement, what are applicant tracking systems capable of? And so when we all want just like, what is the magic wand? How do I get to the top of the pile? But they're actually all written differently. And I mean, there is some nuance in it. And then there could be tools layered over top of those as well that you're not even interacting with directly, that are helping. But, I think you do want the relevant keywords in there. You mentioned earlier, Kim, you want the hard skills, not necessarily like, I'm really good at communication. So, you want to, but you do want to try to match against the job description as much as possible. And I think it's whether there's an applicant tracking system that's screening in the middle or a human recruiter looking at it, make it easy for them to see the obvious fit. And I think that would be my more overarching advice rather than trying to game the system, because the last I checked, there are like 30 leading applicant tracking systems and then a long tail of a couple hundred others that people could be using. There's not a system that you're going to win there. But if you implement some best practices, then you increase your shot or chances overall.
I love that. Craig?
I think some of the two biggest misconceptions are that recruiters, reach out to prospects all in bulk without reviewing resumes, and candidates can somehow trick or fool or beat an ATS into looking at them. I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think what you mentioned earlier, mentioning enough keywords that's going to kind of come up on any search is really good. As I was going on further, sometimes adding two different titles, maybe a slash, like I mentioned earlier, that could help you out. Like, okay, I'm a project manager slash leader in this. That could potentially help you come back up on an ATS better. At some point, whether it's a recruiting coordinator, a recruiting manager, a senior recruiter, they're going to typically hit a wall. They're only going to look at 35 to maybe 60 resumes if they're finding what they want, if they're getting enough candidates. So typically, to me, I think you want to try to reach out to someone quickly when you see something get posted. If you are, apply right away to try to be one of those first people that somebody would be looking at, or be such a strong candidate. Make sure you go through the referral engines, like I said. Once again, I don't feel like there's a way to fool or beat an applicant tracking system. I think it's more so go through your referrals, initiate conversations with people that can get you into that position.
I do think you brought up a good point. I think there are some things you should not do, in my opinion, and I would love to see if there's any like how you feel about this. This one's a little controversial. Most people think you should upload your resume as a PDF, but I've heard that Word is actually a better choice, and it causes less issues. So that's the first thing I'll say. Anyone agree or disagree?
I agree.
Okay. The second thing is, unless you are in a super niche like academia or science, I think a 2-page resume max. I mean, if you have like extensive, like maybe you can creep in like 2.5. But I mean, like I read a stat this week that you have 1.4 seconds to grab someone's attention on social before they scroll past you. And so like whatever you put on your resume, it's got to be super succinct, super polished, clean. Otherwise, you could be the most qualified candidate, but if you make your resume hard for me to read, I'm literally just going to throw it in a trash can. Does everyone think that too, or anyone feel differently? Yeah. Okay. The next thing I will say is, don't go to, I love Canva. Canva is my life, but do not go to Canva and get a resume template with icons and flowers and pictures. One, it's going to cause your resume to get kicked out of the applicant tracking system, or it's going to make it difficult to read. Or when you start to have things like your picture on your resume opens you to bias. Now, this is a double-edged sword. You got to have your picture on LinkedIn because the recruiter is less likely to stay on your page or pick your page if you don't have a picture. But on your resume, it absolutely opens you to even more bias. Anyone have thoughts on that or differing opinions?
Totally agree. I mean, don't leave the pretty thing. If you're a UX designer, don't use your resume to show it. You have probably a separate portfolio that you can link to and rely on something that serves that purpose. Your resume, like no one's going to give you, at least not in this day and age, maybe once upon a time, but in this current day and age, it's more the content of the actual sustenance, the actual substance of the information versus the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, like I think that's where you use LinkedIn, like the featured section, the project section, add your GitHub profile, add examples of your work on LinkedIn. The other two things that I'll say on the resume, and then Craig, I'll turn it over to you, is your resume is one of the most important documents you own on your life, along with your LinkedIn profile. Edit, 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 edit. Like, make sure your punctuation is correct. Make sure you're spelling things correctly. Make sure that if you're no longer there, that the experience is in past tense. I literally pay attention to that as one of the key things along with your experience, because I want to see how much attention you actually have to detail. And if you can't pay attention to detail about yourself, why would I think you could possibly pay attention to the job or role that I'm looking at for you, right? The second thing is 95% of the resumes I read like a job description. while there's some amount of what you did that you want to include, like let's say you're a project manager, I intuitively understand what a project manager does. As you're describing that role, you want to make it clear to people, I was working locally, nationally, or internationally. I was managing one project or 17 projects. I was managing in software implementations, or I was a change manager dealing with multiple projects, right? But beyond that, like your bullets have got to pack a punch. You got to put as much contribution as you possibly can, because what you're hoping is that's what's going to stand out to the recruiter. So your bullets should be in sequential order. The most important thing should be first, and as much as you can quantify, do. And if you're not sure, because a lot of times people will tell me, I can't quantify this. Ask other people you've worked with. How would you quantify this? What else could I say and talk about that would help folks to understand the value that I brought to the table, right? Craig, thoughts?
Yes. So just going off of what you said and everyone else said, most application processes have a space for you to shine. You can put your own personal email, own personal website in there. You can put at your portfolio. They have all kind of spaces for that. Do not do it to your resume. Just plain words. And as you said earlier, Word is better than PDF. It goes into a system much better. Goes right into the system. Or use your LinkedIn profile. A lot of times, if your profile is really up to date and it is well written, that'll go into the system even better. So make sure when they say, "Hey, do you want us to self-populate this with your LinkedIn profile?" If it's up to date and it looks just like your resume, use that. It will populate better. And of course, you said it all. Have someone else look at your resume. Have a spouse. Have anyone else read your resume just to make sure you don't make any type of mistakes. I do this all the time because we're all prone to mistakes. I missed a period, or maybe that was past tense, or maybe that was something that I didn't really want to do there. And getting more people's opinion on your resume is also going to help you with the other point you made. Keep it fluid. Edit it. It's a fluid thing. Whatever job you're going to, you do need to change your resume for that particular role. There's a lot of companies out there that are really looking into different roles. Different experiences and requirements that they have. They're looking for people that could, get pulled from different roles. For example, if you are a person whose role was building relationships, setting up clients, you can use that skill set in so many different things. So making your resume, building it, editing it around that particular job is going to help you get that role.
I love that. I think you want to highlight the translatable skills for the role you want to go into, not necessarily where you've been in the past, right? So your experience is your experience. And maybe you were a nurse and now you want to go into pharmaceutical sales. Maybe you don't have pharmaceutical sales, but you certainly understand electronic medical records and maybe some of the different platforms that are out there. So how do you help folks to understand how easy it's going to be for you to transition into this new opportunity, right?